Talking About Regeneration, the podcast that's about stem cells, gene therapy, and all things regenerative medicine, with perhaps some other fun stuff thrown in for good measure. I'm Kevin McCormack, the Director of Patient Advocacy at the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, or CIRM. We're California's stem cell agency, and we have $5.5 billion to change the face of medicine as we know it. And this podcast will introduce us to some of the people who are helping us do just that. Enjoy the show. Our guests today are two women who are patient advocates and actively involved in the fight against ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's better known as Lou Gehrig's disease. ALS is a nasty progressive degenerative condition that destroys the cells in the brain and spinal cord that control movement, speech, and breathing. The average survival time once you've been diagnosed is only between 2 to 5 years. Nadia Sethi is the Director of Community Outreach and Engagement at the ALS Therapy Development Institute. Marianne Wittenberg is the wife of Harry Wittenberg, and she helps support and care for Harry during his 3-year battle with the disease. Nadia, Marianne, welcome to Talking About Regeneration, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us today about a condition I think a lot of people have heard of, but probably know very little about. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nadia, if we could start with you, what's your role at the ALS Therapy Development Institute?
I am the Director of Community Outreach and Engagement. So my role is to communicate the science of ALS TDI and then also engage with the ALS community in discussions about ALS research, at broad ALS research, not just what's happening at ALS TDI.
Right. And so you have a very kind of personal connection to this condition, don't you?
Yes, my husband sadly was diagnosed with ALS in 2019, and then he passed away at the end of 2020. And it really changed my world, and that's why I'm still here today doing what I do. I don't want anyone to have to live with this disease. So that's my goal, is to change ALS world.
Yeah. So when you talk to people and families who are kind of dealing with ALS, do you think the fact that you've been through something like this helps break down some of the barriers and makes it a little easier for them to talk to you?
Absolutely. I think that I hope that it does. I spent a lot of time talking with other ALS families. It was our friends that got us through ALS. And it was friends that had ALS that I met along the way. And I'm still very close with a lot of them. I have in my room a whole area. It's like a little shrine of cards and notes that people have sent from the ALS community in the last year or two that mean the world to me. So I think we all carry each other through this because nobody gets it like we do. And so I hope that I'm able to provide some comfort to people as I talk with them and they're going through this terrible, difficult journey.
Yeah. Marianne, you became a patient advocate when your late husband, Harry, was diagnosed with ALS. That's a frightening diagnosis. How did you cope with the news?
Like most people, at first we were shocked and certainly went through a period of time where we were in denial. I was determined that I was going to prove the doctors wrong and looked for every other possibility. But eventually, we had to come to acceptance with this. At some point, we just had to make peace with it. It was what was happening, and we needed to move forward so that Harry could have, and we could, as a family, have some sort of quality life.
That's not an easy thing to do, though, is it?
It was a challenge. It was constant problem solving and a lot of creativity. Yeah. I think we did a pretty good job of it. Could have been better, but it is what you have to do.
Yeah. And when some people are diagnosed with ALS, they often shy away from talking about it. But Harry really took the opposite approach, didn't he? He became really active on social media, posting a regular blog called Welcome to My World, how life has changed and making it work. And how did that come about?
Well, at first he wasn't as open. The first 6 months or so where he was really needing to, come to terms with it, he was very private about it, but it eventually became awkward. It actually became more stressful to try to not share it with others. It was quite obvious what was happening to him. But during the process, when he came to terms with it and started to share, it turned out to be extremely helpful for him and supportive to be able to share what he was going through, making other people comfortable by sharing this. He could move on with his life, and he could, still have his social connections. And then he also got a lot back from it because he saw that he was helping others. And as he reached out, more people reached out to him. So his social world became larger. So sharing it was actually a much more healthy thing for him, and allowed him to live a much more positive life those last few years.
Yeah, that's a really interesting turn, isn't it? Where you think it's a struggle to kind of be open about it, but then you find the more open you are, the easier it is, and not just for you, but for people around you who maybe know nothing about it or are scared to even talk about it and don't know how to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Did it help you as well when he was writing like this?
When he was writing his book,
Yeah.
What helped me was reaching out to the community and having the community reach out to us.
Mhm.
And I will say that at first, I felt like we didn't need this. I didn't want to put people out by helping us, because there were definitely times where the assistance we needed was of a very private nature. And I would think people don't want to do this. But I'm very fortunate that friends continue to kind of push their ways into our lives. And we just benefited so much from having them around us. I can't imagine what it's like to live with this disease and not have a community to support you.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to have that community is if you reach out yourself and allow that to come in.
Yeah, I've been to a number of the ALS support groups and seen just how important it is for not just the people with ALS, but the whole family to be able to be there and share with other people who know what they're going through. They don't have to explain things. Everyone understands it.
And, when we finally came to acceptance, and Harry came, was somewhat at peace with the diagnosis, we really started to do some very deep thinking about what kind of legacy he wanted to leave, and what how did he want his friends and his family, and particularly his children, to remember him. And he came to the also to the understanding that this was going to be the one last important lesson that he would be able to share with his children
Mhm.
about how you face these kinds of adversities. That really, I think, was a driving factor for him with all of that he did.
Right. Nadia, do you feel in a way that the work you're doing now is kind of a legacy, a tribute to your husband as well and what he went through?
Loved one go through, what ALS is. And, I don't want anyone else to have to experience that ever again.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare in every single way, and it has to end somewhere, right? And so this is my way of saying it ends with me a little bit. The things that I can change, I will change. And that process changed us forever. It changed my children forever. It's like a wrecking ball that comes through your house. And yeah, we have to end this.
Yeah. Is it hard for you though, having lived through it with your husband, having to kind of, in a sense, go through it again with all these other people that you work with now?
I think there's time. I've learned to just keep a box of tissues nearby. You never know. You really don't. You never know when it's going to hit, and that's okay. And I've learned to accept that. I thought after he left us that I would be better after a certain period of time, and then I started understanding that I will never be better, and that it is what it is, and that
Mhm.
it's okay to embrace those feelings when they come. And, most of the time I'm okay, but there's moments where I'm talking to somebody and it really hits me hard what they're going through and what we went through. And I think it's okay to embrace that and be sad during those times. I mean, we have to grieve together and we have to get through this. And it was a difficult, traumatic experience. And knowing that I'm not alone, to what Marianne was saying, is a big deal. And I hope that I'm able to give that to somebody else and let them know that they're not alone and that it's okay to have those sad feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a medical background as well. Does that help you in the work you're doing when you're working with Therapy Development Institute and talking to people about potential new therapies?
Yeah, so my background is actually in dentistry. I have an undergraduate background in biochemistry, and I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in pharmacogenomics.
Because you have nothing else to do, right?
Well, I'm here to change things. So if we're going to change things, we're going to change things.
Yeah.
But I think that I have a unique background. I think that the science knowledge I have has been helpful. I am not, a lab scientist by any means. I am not an ALS clinician by any means. But I think having that background really helps, and understanding scientific processes has been really useful to what I do, and to communicate some of the science and to have an understanding of the science. That's been really helpful. I think the new education that I'm getting now through the ALS lens is going to be very impactful in the future for what I do for ALS.
Yeah, but that really helps. You have the ability to talk to the scientists and understand what they're saying, but then also to translate that for the families, for the patients.
That is the hope. And I have to ask the scientists many times. And I always joke with Fernando and the team that I also have to watch the ALS TDI videos many, many times and read a research paper many, many times. It takes me a long time to process things because this isn't my trade necessarily. But yeah, that is the hope, that I'm able to absorb some of that information and make it a little bit more accessible to the community.
Yeah. That's what that's how I feel about me. I often describe myself as the official translator for the stem cell agency, because I get to talk to the scientists, and like you, I'm Googling half of the stuff they're saying so I can understand it. And I just think it's like, I ask stupid questions so you don't have to, because it's a whole other language and it's a whole other world. But I think the more we can do to bring in the families and the patients, that's so important.
Yeah, the science matters. It's our science. I always like to say that it's our science. So it's up to us to understand it and to drive it and to change it. And I think the patient voice is incredibly important and strong. And I think the more we know, the better off we all are. So
absolutely. And also to introduce the scientists to the people that they're working towards and helping. I'm always surprised how many brilliant researchers spend 20 years working on something and they've never met anyone who actually has that condition. So bringing the scientists in and making them, introducing them to patients so they can put a human face on hopefully the end result of what they're working on is so important.
Absolutely. And that's what ALS TDI is all about. It was started by a family that was affected by ALS. And, we have people go through our lab, we interact with them regularly, we talk with them regularly, we will connect them with the science team. If they have specific questions, we will get them the answers they're looking for. So we are a lab for the community. And that is exactly our goal, is to connect the community with the science and to have science that changes ALS and finds treatments for everybody with ALS.
Right. Marianne, since Harry's passing, you've become a patient advocate. How did that happen?
Not by choice.
I don't think anyone becomes a patient advocate by choice.
No, people reached out to me, people needing help, needing some support, needing information, and I'm just willing to be there. Harry and I were always very involved and volunteered in a lot of different areas, and this is just an extension of it. And frankly, it makes me feel really good. It makes me feel very empowered that I may be able to help problem solve on a day-to-day basis of, what people are going through. I try just to look at the immediate problem and not look beyond it so that it isn't painful for me. And ultimately the result is positive, and that just makes me feel very good.
So this is for both of you. Is it really frustrating to see the kind of there's a lack of research really in some ways dedicated to ALS? I mean, we've had some clinical trials, most recently the Brainstorm Therapeutics Neuron clinical trial. But in terms of other clinical trials that are kind of getting to the point where they're being tested in people, there's very few really.
Yeah, so I've been tracking the clinical trial pipeline for the last few years, and there's over 100 clinical trials globally right now. And I've seen failures in the last 3 years too, and I'm counting on some of those things to move. You keep, there's excitement and we want everything to succeed.
Yeah.
That's the reality of drug development, is that a lot of things will fail. And I think that's one of the things that landed me at ALS TDI is, we need treatments for everybody. It's a heterogeneous disease. But we also need to keep fueling that clinical trial pipeline with drugs that have a strong mechanism and a good reason to enter clinical trial. And that to me is the most important thing, is to continue to watch the pipeline and to fuel that pipeline with more good potential treatments as they come up. So yeah, it is disappointing and painful to watch those treatments fail, but that's just drug development, and ALS is a difficult disease to crack.
Which brings me to the next question, that notion of, because it's such a disease that has such a short timeline for many people, is it really ethical to require a placebo arm for a clinical trial where people sign up hoping they're going to get something that will help them, but knowing that maybe they have a 50-50 chance of getting the therapy or a placebo treatment? And with a disease like ALS, you're not going to get a second chance. Should we get rid of that notion?
So I think there's a few points there. So regulatory agencies are still requiring a placebo in the late phase trials. And this is a really difficult thing from the patient perspective. It was hard for us, right? Even when we were looking at clinical trials, it's a mind game. It really is. And it puts you in a position where you want hope, and you're living on hope. And at the same time, the science is requiring that, that there's a placebo. I think there's a couple of things that will help. We need strong biomarkers in ALS. We don't have any of those right now. There are many great research institutions working on that. ALS TDI is working on that. We are working on digital biomarkers and blood-based biomarkers. And that's one of the things that will help reduce or get rid of placebos over time. And then we also, we actually have some earlier phase trials in ALS that don't have a placebo. So if it is a real priority for somebody to be in a trial without a placebo, there are options for that. And I think that's something that I'm hoping to communicate over time. And then we also have some more innovation now, and there is some leniency being shown by regulatory agencies. As we've had the Healy platform trial launch, where people have a 75% chance of getting active treatment. And then it's a shorter duration trial, and then they have an open label extension potentially for, an extended period of time where they can access the active treatment after that 6-month period. I mean, those things are innovative and huge, and they're running multiple treatments through the platform trial, and then they're pooling the placebo arms from all of those trials, or from all of those different arms.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful and innovative. And, those are that's the type of thinking we need to reduce placebos. And I'm hoping that we have biomarkers in the future. But for now, I think this is the kind of innovation that's going to change the need for 50% placebo.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like the field is moving on and progressing. Obviously, though, with something like ALS, you want it to progress a lot faster than it is.
Absolutely. It's never fast enough, right?
Yeah.
My friend Sandy Morris says that we live on the ALS clock, and that's true. You feel every second ticking by when you're living with ALS.
So Marianne, do you find working with other families helps you as well?
Absolutely. It gives me purpose, and it gives me a direction. Since Harry's passing, I've had to find things to do with myself, and this is very satisfying.
Even though you know that there's nothing tangible. I mean, like you can't say, oh, here's a therapy, you can do this really helps.
But that's not what I'm working toward. I'm working toward quality of life with the time that, that my friends have.
Yeah.
And that's my goal. The science, whereas I'm very happy that it's happening, is on a day-to-day basis so far away from what I need right now. And I'm grateful that you're all working toward that, but there still is needing to get through the day and needing to get through the week. And, ultimately it's quality of life. And that's where I see I come in.
Right. So what the last question is, what piece of advice do you always follow? And what piece of advice do you always ignore? Marianne?
You want to go first? Oh, want me to go first? Okay. Something that I've lived by a lot in the last few years is, you can't control what's happening, but you can control your response to it. And that can be empowering. Years ago, somebody said to me something like, this is not the cruise I signed up for, but it's the ship I'm on. So you're going to be making the best of it.
I like
that. The thing that I really just never wanted to hear, I am a planner. I like to think ahead, and I like to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I would continually be worried about what was going to happen next and be told, don't worry about it until you have to. And that's not realistic. You need to, whereas I would say, you have to take it one day at a time. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. It's a dance, because you do need to think ahead, and you need to plan ahead. When you're dealing with the day-to-day in this disease, dealing with insurance, dealing with vendors, dealing with doctor's appointments, it all takes time. So you really need to plan ahead for that. And not only just, with equipment needs and medical needs, but emotional needs. And, Harry and I did a lot of work in preparing for, what was ultimately going to happen. And it was painful, but it also provided us a lot of peace at the moment when it was needed.
Right. Thank you. Nadia?
Yeah, so for me, I think one of the pieces of advice that I follow is to solve the easy things first. I think that's always front and center in my mind when I talk with anyone in the research community. It's just, the things that we can solve now easily, let's take care of those. There's a mess everywhere in ALS. There's a lot of things to solve. And so the things that we can get to quickly, that's what we should do. I think it's interesting that Marianne is also using the word empower, because that's the word that comes to mind for me too, right? Solving the easy things first for me was empowering people with information about clinical research. And it's now empowering people with information about the ALS pipeline, whether that's preclinical or clinical. But for me, that's what I'm going to be doing. That's my little place in ALS, is to provide people with information. And again, going back to what Marianne was saying, I think we all have our superpowers. And I've said this over and over again, there's so much to fix in ALS. And if we find our superpower and we use that to do the things that, make us happy, and also provide a service to the community, I think that's really important. I think the thing that I would choose to ignore is to follow the rules. And again, I would challenge the scientific community there as well. There's good science and there are processes that we have to follow, but I think that we often get stuck inside our own box and it's hard to see outside of that. And so where there is space for innovation and collaboration, I think that those things really need to happen in order to drive change for ALS.
Right. Well, I think you both have superpowers, your compassion and your commitment, and just your heartfelt desire to help people. You should be wearing capes for that. So Nadia, Marianne, thank you so much. It's been fascinating and just thoroughly enjoyable talking to you about a thoroughly unenjoyable topic. And I'd like to thank you for coming in and talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. And for all of those at home, in the car or the shower or wherever you listen to your podcast, I'd like to thank you for listening. And we'll hope to see you again here on the next time on Talking About Regeneration.